a couple lines ago.
You're going to do it, I don't know.
Now I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the airport meeting because I got
It's fine with me. Fine with me.
we're having dinner.
But they have a big idea with the...
I don't care if you miss tonight.
But the handy.
I think they... Where does the airport?
Boss and I are like this, there will be no sports on that TV. It's okay, we're live. Try messing with me.
Make me give you the eye.
I got something for you. Putting up with your eye roll for 2 years now.
It's my way of communicating.
We're having a moment of silence.
Good morning. I will call the Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting to order on this date of December 17th. Welcome, everyone. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any adjustments to the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'm asking for one addition to renew the Firewise Coordinator Service Agreement for the next 2 years. This would be item 7E.
Okay. Anything else?
Make a motion to approve the agenda?
Support.
Madam Chair, were we going to table that, the attorney agenda item, or would you like to discuss that when we get to it?
Briefly.
Okay. When we get to it?
When we get to it.
Okay,
If that's good for your time?
that's fine, yep.
Okay, thank you. Have a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, the public are invited to address the county board on matters of county concern. When invited, please sign in and then state your name, address, and the topic you're addressing. Members of the public may speak respectfully up to 5 minutes, and the public comment period is limited to a total of 30 minutes this morning. County board members may ask questions of the speaker, but issues shall not be debated during the public comment period. At the board's discretion, the board may agree to schedule matters addressed during the public comment period on the current board agenda or at a future board agenda. All discussion will be respectful in nature and must be directed at the board and not at other members of the public or of the county. So, Dennis, I recognize you.
Commissioners, thanks for the opportunity
Sign in.
to provide some comments. Let me say,
Okay.
we'll sign in.
So this morning, we have received 2 separate items from the folks who are going to address us. And so that's good for our review, and if in your discussion you can keep your comments to 5 minutes, then we'll have a chance later to read them.
Okay.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to give you some comments today. I'm going to comment on the proposed change of tax classification for homes in nightly rental use. And I have given Commissioner Storlie some copies of this. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but there are a few numbers here that might be good to look at them while I talk, so it makes a bit more sense. I want to address 2 really central issues about that. One is concerns of fairness. We hear the argument that commercial hotels pay a commercial tax rate, whereas second homes pay a lower rate. Traditionally, it's been a seasonal recreation tax rate, and that is essentially unfair. That doesn't really hold up when you look at how the true tax costs are arrived at. Taxes, as you know, are based on value, assessed value. But vacation homes and hotels are valued very differently. Hotels are valued based on their economics, strictly. Typically a multiple of net earnings. Whereas second homes are assessed based on resale values, which ultimately over time translates into replacement cost. When people build or buy second homes, they don't build basically a standalone motel room. They build a home for a family to enjoy and perhaps for themselves to retire to. So the amount of investment and therefore the amount of assessment is much higher relative to the rental earnings than it is at a hotel. So I'm in a good position to understand how this works because we own the American Inn in Tofte, which is taxed commercially, and we also own and operate the Bluefin Bay Family Resorts. American Inn pays just under $58,000 in taxes on a bit over $1 million in gross revenue. So it pays about 5.5% of gross income as its real estate tax cost. A typical one-bedroom condo at Bluefin earned $50,000 in gross rental income over the past year. In 2019, it paid $2,450 in taxes, which is 4.9% of gross income. The non-homestead residential rate assessed for taxes payable next year will change its taxes to $2,900, which is 5.8% of gross income. So even at that rate, it's already pays a higher percent than our hotel does. But if these get moved to commercial classification, the taxes would be approximately $7,600, which is over 15% of gross rental income. Most of all of these homes in nightly rental have a management company, and the total costs of management services and housekeeping and related come typically to about half of gross rental income, meaning half of gross rental income goes back to the owners. So when you take the tax cost that's proposed as under commercial classification as a percentage of what really goes to the owners, it would be about 30% of the gross rental income, which completely changes the economics of the whole ownership prospect from what everyone's assumed as they've made these investments. So I want to talk now just a minute about the 183-day threshold for movement to commercial that's under discussion. This standard would result in owners who allow their units to be rent over 183 days to lose money. They wouldn't earn enough extra money in the days exceeding that to pay the extra tax costs. The result of that is, and we're already seeing it, is people saying, okay, I counted my days, I want it to be taken out of rental during the low season times when the rates are lower, and I want to keep my unit in rental when the rates are at peak during the summer and the fall peak.
So Dennis, you've had 5 minutes. Do you want to summarize quickly?
Sure. So the bottom line of that is we would see a lot of units go out of rental. They would pull out after 183 days, and that would take away most of our lodging inventory during all the shoulder seasons and quiet times that we've all been working so hard to build up to make our economy more year-round. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dennis.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So I'm Bryce Campbell from Lutzen Resort. I just wanted, mine will be kind of brief, but I just wanted to speak as a new investor here in Cook County. Last year, as many of you know, we purchased Lutzen Resort, which was a multi-million-dollar investment in Cook County. Since then, we've invested additional capital into the property and continue to do so. And part of this, making this investment for us, was counting on the ability to increase room nights. And with this new classification, if we're limited to 183 days, it not only limits our current investment, but also limits future investments. And I'm greatly concerned, as one of the biggest investments that we're hoping to add in the future is the development of a $4 million Nordic spa. And my goal in 2020 was you'd probably be getting applications from us for building permits and stuff like that. Now instead, we're faced with a challenge that to do this development, we need the ability to do 60% occupancy on the property. And under this classification, the majority of our own units, which breaks down to just under 150 keys, will be limited to 50% occupancy and will hinder our future development plans. So if this happens, we'd be forced to probably rethink the spa and move it to a location in Two Harbors. So I'm greatly concerned not only that our current investment would be now limited, but any future development would also be limited. I just wanted to put that out as consideration, as you guys are going to hear lots about this topic, but it's not, you're hearing from an existing owner that talks about having to scale down the business, but it will also hinder the ability for people to develop the businesses further up here. And I want you to all hopefully take that into consideration as you go through all of this. And as I said, mine will be a bit more short and sweet, but wanted you to hear from a new investor as well and our concern. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Bryce.
Madam Chair, County Board members, my name is Jim Boyd and I'm the Executive Director of the Cook County Chamber of Commerce. You may remember the last time I spoke before you, it was about a year ago. I spoke up to praise the job that the County Assessor and his staff had done the first time in deciding how to classify short-term rentals for property taxation. It was brilliant. I'm hoping you also will remember the times I've stood with you in support of large levy increases that you really needed to do in order to protect county services and stabilize county finances. Last week, the Chamber Board approved a resolution asking that you instruct the County Assessor to suspend his property reclassifications for short-term rentals and await further clarification and direction from the Minnesota Legislature or the Minnesota Department of Revenue. While the current assessor has done a fair amount of research on this issue and has been generous in sharing it, at this point, however, we asked in our resolution that you encourage him to slow down and let the state take the lead. We withdrew the resolution when the interim county administrator advised it did not reflect the policy direction the county assessor was taking. On reflection, however, I still want you to see and read that resolution. Much of it remains accurate. I think, respectfully, that the assessor's solution is flawed. The assessor's new solution is for short-term rental is to classify those that rent for more than 183 days as commercial and return those that rent for less to their original seasonal rec classification. But it violates the principle of tax fairness to tax a home rented 185 days at the full commercial rate and a home rented for 175 days at the seasonal rec rate. Both are income producing, a point Revenue Commissioner Bowerly emphasized in an NPR interview last week. Yet neither is fully commercial either. A year ago, the assessor emphatically made that same point, and he was right. They are a mix of commercial and residential and need a tax classification that recognizes that mix. This new policy would cause almost all cabin homes to avoid the 183-day threshold by renting for fewer days so they might remain in the seasonal rec classification where they started. So that means the small resorts and hotels and others who raised the original tax fairness issue would confront the exact same competitive disadvantage they started with. Although I must say, I think that attributing the loss of hotel rental days to the marginal cost of taxes is an equation that really deserves a whole lot more scrutiny than it's received. Moving those cabin homes back to the seasonal rec tax class also would move them back into the state general tax pool, and that will cost Cook County hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual tax revenue collected from outside the county, dollars that would need to be made up in budget cuts or levy increases. Then comes the really complex issue involving the approximately 300 condominiums and townhomes that are affected. Almost all of those are within seasonal resorts like Bluefin, Caribou Highlands, and Lutzen Resort, but are owned by families, most of whom live outside Cook County. Those family condos sit right next door to identical condos owned by the resorts themselves. Those resort condos enjoy a significant tax break so long as they do not rent for more than 250 days. They're managed to avoid that threshold. But under the assessor's plan, the family-owned condos next door would be forced to reduce their rentals to fewer than 183 days or be taxed at the commercial rate. Therein lies a large unfairness and a source of tax court issues that I think you were trying to avoid. The damage would go further. Forcing those condos to rent for less than 183 days means roughly a 30% reduction in the rental for the 300 units. That translates into significantly fewer visits to the county gift stores and grocery stores, restaurants, and outfitters. Our entire economy would take a hit. Meanwhile, the market value of those 300 condos would plummet. The decades-old business plan that has allowed them to be successful, based on a 250-day rental model, will have been destroyed. And that would mean they produce far fewer tax dollars for the county coffers. This idea that commercial will bring you more is not accurate. You would again confront the prospect of, on top of the potential Ty-Blatnick effect, of being required to adopt enormous levy increases simply to sustain the county services that you need to sustain for our residents. A better, more nuanced solution to this tax issue can be fashioned, one that is fair to all and does less damage to Cook County economy and government. The Minnesota Department of Revenue and the Minnesota Legislature are the people to establish that policy. That's why we believe the county should suspend this reclassification process and give the state the time to work out a proper solution.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Sure.
Thank you, Brady. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
At the December 10th meeting of the Cook County Grand Marais EDA, Mary Somnus. Okay. At the December 10th meeting of the Cook County Grand Marais EDA, the board discussed current activities in Cook County relative to short-term rental property tax classification. The board engaged in this discussion because the proposed changes on page 24 of your meeting packet today will have a significant negative impact on our economy. It is understood that these changes will negatively impact all property owners and taxpayers, not only those properties in use as short-term rentals. Please recall that in December of 2013, the Go Cook County team approved a shared vision for prosperity 2025. It begins, Cook County is a vibrant, sustainable, and prospering rural community. The EDA shares this vision, and we work diligently toward that end every day. A vibrant, sustainable, and prosperous economy includes full-time, year-round employment for the people of our community. Local businesses have made great progress towards this goal. And a result of that progress is the bond rating agencies that set interest rates for Cook County have given us more favorable bond interest rates, acknowledging that we have established a year-round rather than seasonal economy. After thoughtful consideration, the EDA Board approved this position statement. A legislative moratorium on changes in the tax classification of short-term rental properties and creation of a state task force to address the public policy issues related to this issue, and legislative changes that would provide unequivocal clarity and remove subjective interpretation by making modifications to the existing property tax classifications or creating a new classification if necessary to reflect the mixed residential and commercial use of these properties. So, as you've heard this morning, there are a number of issues and concerns around this very complex matter, and we would request that there would be further time on the next county board agenda, or that a subcommittee might be created to work with the stakeholders and help to resolve this in a manner that addresses the things that you've heard this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Anyone else for public comment?
Good morning.
Morning.
Arvis Thompson. I wish to speak to the issue of commissioners' compensation. I believe it's on the agenda for today. Why did you each choose to take on public service? You had an income before you came here. You chose to make this a 4-year job. No promises at the end that it would go on, that it would ever mushroom into anything unless you're looking for a political career. I'm wondering why we are looking at making this a more attractive to younger individuals, what we're thinking about here as we talk about more compensation. I don't believe money is going to recruit a better representation. Perhaps a sense of accomplishment, of being fair, neutral representation, caring for your history, caring for the community, things which money is not going to buy. This position right now has a median income of $44,000, has an income which is comparable to the median income of around $44,000. I think that is attractive in itself, just as it stands, without adding anything to it. There's a great diversity on the board right now. Why would you want to change that? Do you want it to look like all young people? I think it looks very attractive right now to see a representation that is both very young and of the senior persuasion.
Thank you.
It brings a different flavor to everything that you have to look at, and you've got some hot issues coming up, as you always seem to have. I like the representation that I see. Please don't turn this into a job and try to seek it as a position that people will look at as a job. This is community service, and I don't think you can pay enough for community service.
Thank you.
Jarvis, thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Okay. Thank you for your concerns. Those of you who came to hand out your talk so that we could review it again, thank you on that. If you can stay around, we do have Bob Thompson as part of our agenda in a little while. So before we move on to our regular board meeting, for the last couple board meetings, I've been addressing our Speak Your Piece. and I pick a topic or a word, and so I'm going to address that now, as this is our last board meeting of 2019. By evaluating our level of communication and avoiding personal attacks and general stubbornness, we can avoid unhealthy debate, and we can continue collaboration, understanding each other. My word today is pay attention, which we always do. We pay attention to you folks who come before us in the past and in the future. So pay attention means being aware of our world as a board, and being aware of your world, and being aware of all of our world together. I think that can bring about a general understanding that we hear you, and that we address you in ways that we can, both privately, with addressing us at the board meeting, with addressing us through personal contact, and therefore our debate can become quite healthy. So moving on to the consent agenda, motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I have found one correction in the minutes from December 3rd.
Okay.
Very small correction, but it's on item 9C. Because I said it. A new director for the Northeast Minnesota Office of Job Training was found and offered a position. However, we're still looking, we're in the interview process for the Community Health Board, so that was we have not selected a director for that position at this point. Thank you, Stacy.
Okay, anything else?
Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, the changes there.
Okay. Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to the assessor.
All right, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm here to give an update on the short-term rental classification for property taxes. Obviously, this has kind of been an ongoing discussion. Direction of the Department of Revenue came out in May 2019. There's been a lot of discussion prior to that, dating back all the way 5 years from what I understand in Cook County. This has kind of been a discussion. I know for the last year and a half it's been a discussion in the assessor's office. So where we're at, given the memo and discussion with Attorney Hicken and interim county administrator Rena, we have come to what we feel satisfies the Department of Revenue's memo, which I feel I have to do given that I'm licensed by the state of Minnesota. I'm not just an employee of Cook County. I carry an assessor's license that is held to a set of standards. So we've established this 180-day threshold if you're renting out your cabin property. And I feel that 183 days or more is going to be pretty defendable as a primary use when you're looking at multiple uses, to make an argument that 6 months and a day is not primary over less than 6 months is not, I don't even think it's debatable. So doing what I feel I have to do to satisfy the Department of Revenue's memo. In addition, we have to look at when an investor owns multiple properties. Let's say I find somebody owns 4 properties that are in the rental market. Same individual, same investor, same corporation. When I look at that, I say, you could have 1 cabin, but beyond that, that's not typical. People don't have 5 cabins. That becomes an investment property, and in those situations, we wouldn't look at we wouldn't look at comparing multiple uses. We would say the only use is the rental. There may be some incidental personal use here and there, but looking at that as also primary use commercial. So trying to have minimal impact on the taxpayers of Cook County while satisfying the Department of Revenue's memo is the goal of the assessor's office and the county. And I think that Attorney Hicken is we've had a lot of discussions, and I think we both came to this agreement. And, this has been like I say, a moving target over the last year and a half. It was different a year ago. I heard public comment from the chamber where a year ago there was a different determination on classification, but the memo directed statewide kind of changed the game. And I can verify, and a simple Google search can also confirm that many county assessors, in fact, all of them in Region 4, which is northeastern Minnesota, are intending to identify and change the classification of these properties. Some counties, I know, aren't even sending out a questionnaire. If they find it advertised, it's getting changed. Other counties are sending out a questionnaire. It's kind of, it's how the assessor establishes that, what he has to do to satisfy the memo. But I can say that there's not one county in the Region 4 area that said they're doing nothing. So Cook County won't be any less attractive or more attractive in this whole, issue or topic. I know, given radio interviews with WTIP, Tom Bach is taking this issue up at the next legislative session, so where this may fall a year from now, who knows, but this is where we're at today, and that's the determination I've made. We've given some interviews to try and put the information out there so that people, can alleviate their concerns, or at least, know what's going to happen. So I think at this point, if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are you looking at some type of time frame on this from the state to actually enact it?
This is going to occur for the January 2nd, 2020 assessment, so coming up in a couple of weeks, and that will affect the 2021 taxes.
Because the legislative session doesn't start until in February, so, we've been your advocate for all of the times we met with Senator Bach, and I believe he went to the top, to the governor, and to the head of the Department of Revenue to try to come up with, as if we don't need another classification, but something that would be a little more amiable.
Right, so I am on the legislative committee with the Association of Assessing Officers in Minnesota, and we get emails as soon as a bill is proposed. We get emails, and then we distribute it around to our region. We get feedback from every assessor in the region, and then we take that back to the legislative committee, and the Association of Assessors will either take a position statement on it, or they will leave it at, depending on what the topic is. I have 3 coming for the next legislative session, but not one of them addresses short-term rental. One of them is related to relative ag homesteads. Another one is for low-income housing. They're looking for a tax credit. And the last one, I don't recall off the top of my head, but there's 3 topics out there, and none of them so far are the short-term rental issue. So as far as I know, nothing's been proposed at the legislative level for the next session. Tom Bach made it clear that he's going to take it up. As far as timelines go, our assessment date is January 2nd, 2020. Under the current directive, without any change, anything could change at any time if we get more directive, or if something were to change at a state level that's issued statewide in a formal communication, then I would take it in, and use that as my directive. That hasn't happened at this point. We haven't received a formal communication that the May 21st memo is not valid or shouldn't be enforced. So now we have the local boards and the County Board of Appeals, which this year was June 18th. We could change anything from, the assessment on January 2nd all the way up to June 18th. Last year, I think the session closed May 20th. So if something were to change, or if a classification was created, there is the administrative change process that can be done at a local level. Otherwise, the state could potentially develop some type of a credit for that 1 year where, things fell into a category. But, who knows where this might end up at the legislative level. When you're talking income, it's a choice that you have as a taxpayer or a property owner, how you operate, how you use your property. And some legislators might see this as a very big issue, and, that they want something to occur different, and some may look at it differently, but that's all, out of my hands. The discussion of we would like something other than what is the current situation happens at the state level, legislative level.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Dukirk?
There was a comment that some of the properties are assessed on their net earnings. We don't assess property on net earnings.
We don't value them based off of income. In fact, our software for appraisals, they just got an income model, and typically that's going to be used on like apartments and hotels and rental income producing properties. We don't ask like the restaurant how much money they make, you know, so we don't look at income as far as valuation, and the only way income affects anything I do in my office is determining whether or not it's an income producing property for use classification, like commercial, seasonal resort, seasonal restaurant. Typically, anything producing an income is going to be commercial unless it's defined as something else. You know, if it's defined as a seasonal resort, which I think a number of years ago, the legislator made a classification so that these seasonal resorts that operate somewhat seasonally, they don't do the same business as a hotel in say, a city. And in most cases, they're sitting on a lake, so they have, you know, high-value frontage, and that was an effort to help and ease the tax burden so we wouldn't lose all the resorts in Minnesota.
And then most people know I hate winter, and so this morning I got up and watched the news, and they're talking about 20 below outside, and I'm thinking, you know, the rest of the family's in Florida. So I've got my house here, and I decided to go to Florida for 4 months. And it's so nice, I decided the next year to go for 6 months. Do you look at my 183 days on my private property and say, Heidi, you've been in Florida too long, so I have to make you seasonal?
As far as the homestead goes?
Yep.
Unless you file for a similar program in another state or in Minnesota, we take your application as a homestead that you're declaring that's your primary residence. I know we have pulled homesteads, not specifically because somebody isn't there for 183 days. I mean, there's nothing in the statute that says you have to be there 6 months and a day for it to be your primary residence.
Okay.
We have a lot of snowbirds who do file their primary residence up here for the summertime, and then they go and stay in another state for the winter. So that's common, and we don't question a homestead application for the most part unless we receive information that says it's not, you know, may not be valid, like a duplicate homestead application in the state of Minnesota, or we've even had calls from other states where they said, you know, we have this as a mailing address, do you have a homestead application for this person? And I think that happened in Arizona last year, so.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out where the 183 days comes from.
That comes from, there's 365 days in a
Yep.
year, so if you want to find the middle of the road, that's 182 and a half days.
Okay.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you. So is this change, the proposed change is still going to have a conflict with side-by-side units that are managed differently or owned differently, or what?
So I heard the comment from Dennis and from the chamber, but essentially, like Bluefin Bay, I don't know, I mean, they may own some individual units, but they don't have like a lodge building where they have 27 units or 30 units like Caribou Highlands or Lutzen Resort, where they have that main lodge that the lodge actually owns. So that lodge is part of that specific tax classification that was created by the legislator a few years ago to help ease the burden of commercial property taxes on resorts, and they set a 250-day threshold. The only reason I can't throw all of those resort units into that category is because it specifically states in the statute 3-unit minimum under the same ownership. So you look at those resorts and you say, well, there's 100 units there. How is that not a resort? Well, if you're just an individual owner and you don't have 3 contiguous units or parcels, that doesn't meet the qualification. Now, we have gotten a lot of responses back of properties that I'm not super familiar with because I haven't done inspections at Caribou or Bluefin, but there's 3-unit lockouts and there's a number of them. So those 3-unit lockouts, if they have 3 separate entrances, you could put 3 separate parties or groups in those rentals, they will meet that classification most likely for the seasonal resort. So, you know, if there's an inequity, I mean, it's just because some don't meet that special classification that was created for resort properties. Arguably, the resort's going to pay a much higher tax rate, like Caribou Highlands, when they have 37 units and all the common areas and all that, they're going to have a much higher value and a much higher tax bill. So that was a decision by the legislator to create a beneficial classification for those resorts. And I think that the description of a resort has changed over the years. I think when the early version was 5 units, which follows like the Department of Health's definition of a resort, which is statute 157.15. And now that resort has been modified to being 3 units. So clearly, discussions have happened over the years, and people have looked at this intensively, that the lawmakers have looked at this, and they've created a seasonal resort classification to try and ease some of the burden of commercial property taxes. Now, there's businesses in town here that close down for however many months of the year. You know, the donut shop, for example. They pay commercial tax all year round. Doesn't matter that they're a seasonal business.
And so, I think it's important to talk about consequences and look at the position that we're in. You know, I think we're in a pretty tight spot, but I don't think we have much choice. And I think the proposed change, as is now, is as lenient as we can be as far as mitigating consequences. I know there was talk before about primary use not including, you know, not dividing it by half the year, dividing it differently as far as if a homeowner was up for 3 days, but they rented it for 10, then the primary use is rental, even though it's vacant for the majority of the year. So this, I mean, certainly, I think we all understand this will have huge consequences, and none of us are happy about it. But I don't know that we as a county can do more than talk to the state about addressing this. You know, the way I see it, we can comply with the state or not. And I think it's important to look at the consequences of both of those. If we comply with the state, there's going to be a serious economic impact. This is arguably, I think, lesser than it could have been. If we don't comply with the state, what are our consequences?
Well, I can say for sure that if I was given a cease and desist per se, per the resolution that I read, or if the county board told me to stop collecting questionnaires, I would be filling out applications for other.
Yeah, we'd lose our assessor.
Right.
If you didn't voluntarily do it, it could be involuntarily done by the state.
Yeah, exactly. And let's say I take a bold stand and don't change anything under the request of the, you know, organizations. I lose my license, a new assessor comes in and does exactly what the state wants him to do. So, you know, do we want to stick our neck out on the chance that nothing would happen? I wouldn't. I had a conversation with the director of the Property Tax Division, Mr. John Klockziem, after the Commissioner of Revenue met with the governor and Tom Bach, and he said specifically that any assessor that doesn't follow this directive is going to have very tough questions to answer when they do an audit.
Yeah, and, you know, I don't think it's your role to advocate one way or another. It's your role to follow the directives, and that's what you're given, and it hurts us, it hurts our community, it hurts these businesses and business owners, yeah, there's all kinds of ripple effects that we may not even see. So I appreciate that you've looked at this as much as you have and been receptive to different ways of looking at it as well. So thank you.
Commissioner Duggar?
The ripple effect came from the state's directive, because I can tell you when I was elected in 2012 and started in 2013, this has been a conversation I've had with our legislators over and over and over and over and over and over, that we need to do something because we are unique, and the response has always been we can't change things just for Cook County. And now it's statewide, and now they have to do something. So the ripple came from that, not from us. When I started, the other issue we had here is that many of our properties had not been assessed in a long time, and the state was on us about that and gave us a directive, and we have come through some incredibly difficult times, some changes in our assessor's office, and I have the utmost trust and faith and respect for that office and the work that they have done since I got here to make sure that we are fair and equally taxed for everyone. And it's been hard, and there are tough decisions to make, and it's not about money. It's not about the bottom line. It's not about more income to the county. Commercial classification doesn't give us more money. It goes to the state. And so it's not, our assessors don't go out looking to make the most money for the commissioners. They don't go out assessing property because, oh, we found out we might not get our PILT funding, so I, the assessor, need to go make it better for the county board. That's not how it works. This is a fair process. It's a system that works, and I'm sorry, but the issue is above us. And you need to talk to the legislators, because I've done it and it's hasn't changed anything. So thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where a year and a half ago, I actually can recall an email, but regardless, a year and a half ago, there was discussion that, hey, we need to get the legislators working on this topic and hopefully come up to some other solution, because
Way
if it...
before that.
Yeah, I mean, and that, like you're saying, I'm not familiar with what it was 5 years ago, but I know a year and a half ago, the discussion was there, and nothing really, I mean, no bill was proposed at the last session. It could have been. And to speak to the commercial change, everyone's assuming that 640 properties are going commercial. The numbers, I don't have them back, but it's not going to be 640. It's probably not even going to be 340. I don't even know how, I mean, it could be far less than that. But what does go commercial will benefit the other taxpayers of Cook County. If you were to look at the change we made last year, it essentially almost washed a 6% levy increase. We had about an 8% increase in tax capacity in the county by making that change. I would anticipate almost twice that if every one of them went to commercial. It would be close to 15% of the tax capacity increasing, which could wash out a 15% levy increase. So, I mean, speaking numbers, just rough estimates, this is a moving target. Obviously, if you change all those properties, tax rates go down because capacity went up. Other taxpayers benefit.
But the whole tax collected doesn't come to us.
Not all of it. Some of, a good chunk of it would. In fact, if you look at the commercial tax rate, the first $100,000 stays all local. Okay. The tax capacity for that first $100,000. Now, every single property over $100,000 would pay more in that, about 25% more, and everything under $100,000 would pay 25% more on their property tax bill to the county. So now, how much of it would go to fiscal disparities? I don't think there's a person in the state that could tell you that.
Well, our word for the day is pay attention. So we'll do what we can do. I mean, not that I'm trying to be Pollyanna here, but let's say Senator Bach gets it on the legislative agenda and they do vote on it. Then where do we go with that then?
So the county could send down a representative to testify. The Association of Assessing Officers could send down a representative if they take a position on a given proposed bill. And I think that I would be the candidate for that, because every time the discussion comes up at a meeting about short-term rentals, every head in the room turns towards me. So I think that if something does happen at the legislative level, the county board could develop a position statement and send somebody down to testify.
Okay. And you've sent out letters in the survey?
The survey is out. I would estimate, I mean, I don't know what we've got today or yesterday, but as of Friday, we had about 50 back. I've had a lot of calls and emails, and I've actually had taxpayers come in, and one of the taxpayers who was in my office yesterday has 2 properties that are going to switch to commercial, and he knows that the effect is almost a double in his tax. They are going from about $700 to $1,200, and he smiled, shook my hand, and he said, well, thanks for working on this. He said, I'm glad you're so open and communicating, and I mean, you know, it's not, the sky isn't falling on everyone's, you know, from everyone's perspective.
Would it be okay to send us the letter too, so we could review it in case
The
we get
questionnaire?
questions?
Yeah, I can send you all the questionnaires as soon as I
that'd
get
be
back.
Madam Chair, Bobby has his hand up.
Yeah, I spoke with the governor last week, and that was the first thing he brought up. And he's hoping to, and he said he talked to Bach about it and hoping they can come up with a solution, so.
As a freshman here, is there anything more we can do to be proactive on this issue from our?
I think the county should pitch a bill themselves. I mean, you could write a bill and pitch it to the legislator.
That sounds really easy.
Send it on to Tom Bach or something. I mean, you know, that, I don't know exactly how it works either. I'm a freshman in this as well, but I know when certain individuals are affected or are looking for a change, they pitch a bill, and then, you know, from there, it's up to the lawmakers.
Well, I think that sounds pretty worthwhile, and there might be members in the community that would be willing to help with that, too.
Yeah, I think it's just a prime example of lobbying for Cook County, which some people do very well, and I certainly would support that. And as a
Right.
commissioner, and have talked to whoever I can about the issue, and we've had these discussions in northeast Minnesota on some of our land use issues, and so we're pretty unique.
Yep. And 92% of our land area is exempt from property taxes.
Yeah, but we get that pill payment.
Maybe. So let's pursue that. This is the last meeting for this year, but we can put our heads together maybe with Molly and Rena and figure out how we could do that after the first of the year and send it out. So we'll do what we can do.
Okay, and as soon as, I mean, if anything comes through from the legislative
Yes.
committee, you know, if a bill gets pitched, I don't know if it goes to the House first or where it starts at, but when that gets pitched, I will get a notification, and I will update the board, I will update, you know, I'll get a hold and update everyone in the community that I can, and let them know that, hey, this is the bill that's being proposed,
Okay.
so.
We'll be working on it.
Thanks, Bob.
Anything
Yeah,
else? Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, land services.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners.
Morning.
We have one item on the agenda today, which is a conditional use permit request from Easton Nelson, which was heard at the Planning Commission in in early December, forwarded to the Board of Commissioners. Before I get involved in that, I would like to make a brief statement. During preparation for this conditional use presentation to the Board of Commissioners, I did find out that, in fact, some of my statements were, in fact, somewhat flippant and unprofessional. I spoke with, regarding Mr. Hal Greenwood, I did speak with Mr. Greenwood's daughter, just to apologize. That was a completely unprofessional approach on my part. And on behalf of Land Services, I apologize to the Board of Commissioners if that's caused any inconvenience, and it won't happen again. That said, the conditional use permit presented by Easton Nelson involved a 28-acre parcel on Devil Track Road, which was actually uninhabited. It's been vacant for about 60 to 70 years, as far as we could tell. It's in the FAR 3 zone district, and one of the things that has to occur for a development of a parcel that's uninhabited is a conditional use permit is necessary in order to establish an accessory building greater than 3,000 square feet without the presence of a primary residence. So that said, Mr. Nelson came into Land Services in August. We started to work the process of what was necessary. He submitted a grade and fill permit and subsequently came before the Planning Commission. Now, one thing that should be noted is that during site evaluation for the grade and fill permit, we did evaluate and notice that, in fact, the site clearance exceeded what was proposed in the grade and fill permit. On the grade and fill permit, it was identified at about 9,000 square feet. In actuality, over an acre of land was cleared. We initiated an enforcement on that from the stormwater ordinance. Involved Easton in the process, and what has occurred since then is that he has been required to identify a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP, for the site. He's also obligated to apply for and receive a large site stormwater plan from the county, and also a national pollution discharge elimination system permit from the state of Minnesota. Those are all requirements for him to go forward into the construction process itself. Regarding the building itself, again, it's over 10,000 square feet. It's relatively isolated due to a pretty significant vegetative buffer. It is invisible from the Devil Track Road, and its entryway is off of the gravel pit entryway, so it's kind of taking care of two birds with one stone as far as access goes. What Mr. Nelson has proposed is an approximate 10,000 square foot building, which would be used for commercial storage, assuming some of the pit equipment would be stored there, and also to open it up as a commercial storage unit. He identified limited hours, primarily Monday through Friday, 7 until 5, and 7 until noon on Saturday. So it shouldn't be a really big distraction for the residents. Some of the concerns, that were brought up were, in fact, that as a residential unit, we're establishing a commercial presence on a residential parcel. So that's always a consideration. The land use guide plan goes to great lengths to identify that meshing of commercial and residential uses. And in the discussion with the land services and as well as the Planning Commission, it was identified that this was probably a good fit given the isolation of the unit and the need for that type of storage facility in the Maple Hill area, Devil Track Lake Road. The vote was 4-1 in favor. Chair Fear dissented, but it was passed with the recommendation from the Planning Commission that it be brought to the Board of Commissioners and approved during your consideration.
Okay, thank you. So 13 letters went out, and there were no comments that came back?
No.
Okay. Questions, comments, Commissioner Mills?
Thank you. Thank you for your attention and apology for the comments previously. I appreciate that. So the issue with enforcement, that was because too much area was cleared, is that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and actually, if you look at the conditions on the conditional use permit, there was an agreed upon November 30th submittal of the large site stormwater plan. We still haven't received that. We've received the SWIP. Easton has contracted with an engineering firm. So, you know, at this time of year, we have deadlines which are primarily paper-related. There's nothing we can do at this point in the landscape now. So we'll work with him to make sure that he gets those permits in. I have every expectation that he will do that.
Thank you. So is it, and that clearing is associated with the grade and fill, like, what I'm just curious, could a person just buy 20 acres and clear the whole thing? Or is that, you need a permit for that?
You would need a permit, and
okay.
This is not shoreland area. It's within a protected waterways, but it's outside of the 300-foot limit, which means that your ability to clear is greatly reduced. If you look at the stormwater ordinance, there are thresholds for permit involvement, square footage. In a non-shoreland area, the threshold really comes into about 10,000 square feet. The problem is that his original permit identified a 10,000 square foot clearance, we go out and look at the site, and it's greater than that. So we've had engaging discussions, and I think we'll have some sort of a solution here once we get back to seasonal temperatures.
Thank you.
I generally support the project, and thanks for your work on it. And I also, it came to my attention when I read it that the comments were inappropriate, and I wanted to let you know that, and thank you for apologizing. I also believe in reparation, so I've got a question. When we apologize, we sometimes try to make things right. So is it possible to strike this from the record as a meeting? Is this a public record, the comments that we're referring to? Will that be part of your minutes? Will it be part of your record? And if it is, I would like action taken at the next meeting to delete it.
Well, and, the records of that meeting are actually the recording. This was not, I did not have access to the recording for my comments. I usually take notes, so the actual record of that meeting is going to be on a voice recording, which wasn't downloaded onto the site for me to access it. So this is a paraphrase, which is where the interpretation came in, that was just me. I wasn't going verbatim from the tape.
So this isn't, it's become public by my reading it.
Right, but as far as the record of the meeting, it's going to be on the tape. I don't know if Attorney Hicken has any input on that. It is, there's two records here technically. One is what was presented to you on my narrative, and also the voice recording of the meeting itself.
This would be in our minutes next meeting, and we can not approve them unless it's...
I'm going back to the question of the commission. So Attorney Hicken had her hand up.
Your Honor, Your Honor.
Wow, thank you. I'm really on a roll today. Haven't been referred to as very old, just senior.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Bershheim, I appreciate that thought and that kind of creative solution for this, but I suspect that the narrative that Mr. Lane submitted, it's been now provided to the Planning Commission and, the Board of Adjustment.
The Board of Commissioners only. Because the meeting with Easton was our last meeting. We have not had the next meeting where the minutes have been submitted.
I'm not talking about the minutes, I'm talking about the actual narrative.
Yeah, the narrative is part of the minutes. He did the narrative after the meeting, and we haven't had a meeting. And I
Okay.
have confirmation from
Gotcha.
Tim right now. It's not
Okay,
part of the
so
planning.
not part of the Planning Commission or Board of Adjustment board packet, if you will, but it's a part of this board's board packet. And I suspect that it is an official record and that we cannot destroy it at this point. I pulled up the statute for official records right now so I can do the research and kind of confirm that opinion. But I don't think destruction of it is a legal way to go about remedying the situation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Duker?
My concern with removing it is that people who come in after the fact and watch the video will have no idea why there's this long discussion and apology about it. So I think we just leave it alone and we all learn a valuable lesson and we move forward. And I know Mr. Lane will be better next time, as our First Lady likes to say.
And Mr. Lane's apology will be in the minutes of this meeting as well, so this whole thing will be covered, but...
Thank you.
Motion to approve CUP.
Second.
I support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. Superior Hiking Trail Association Agreement.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I apologize, I have a cold. So basically, we're here today is the Superior Hiking Trail Association Executive Director Denny Kneff came to you back on December 23rd, back in 2018, asking for an approval of a reroute of their trail over on the Pincushion area to separate the trail from the Pincushion Mountain Ski Trail, which was asked to be done by the Forest Service. And so he and I have worked with the attorney, the county attorney Hicken, and have done the agreement. And so we're basically presenting that agreement to you today for the final approval. And if anybody wanted a visual reference, I did print off some maps if anybody wanted that. But it's basically just moving, separating the trail. There's, just a number of feet, basically, that are separating the trail. So it was already going through the county parcel to begin with, and it's just basically moving it to separate the two.
Questions or comments?
Will we approve the final draft?
I second.
Any other questions, comments?
This is the same, plan since I was representing the city on the Parks and Trails.
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's impressive, the process.
Have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so just briefly, we had on here that we had a directive from the President of the United States on refugee resettlement. And so because we have a short period of time, I thought, to act on this, I did some research, starting with the Minneapolis Tribune, but then I went to other areas, and the way I read it, according to this Attorney Hicken, is that we would have until January 31st to actually act on the county deciding if they would accept a resettlement of refugees.
Madam Chair, I first have to start by saying I did make a mistake in, I think, my board packet submission in saying that we had that the deadline was December 26th for county action. You're correct, it's not December 26th. We have a longer time. There is not technically any deadline imposed upon counties for putting forward this consent. The concern is that if we wait too long, the impact will be that there wouldn't be, that the agencies who are responsible for placing, resettling refugees have a deadline of January 31st. If consent hasn't been submitted, written consent by the counties by that time, then any county that hasn't submitted consent is out of the running for refugee resettlement, which I think if there were a large number of counties to not submit their consent before January 31st, the effect might be to, concentrated areas of refugee resettlement. And I know that the commissioners likely have an interest in this and would like to discuss and look into it further. I don't see any problem with delaying action until the January 14th board meeting. I think it would be a good idea to address it at that time.
Okay, so I received information from the state refugee coordinator and various people, which I passed on to you, so perhaps, Molly, before the January 14th, you could send out something that would be important for everybody to read, so in making a decision on this?
I can, again, file something similar to the agenda report that I have already filed. The couple attachments to that report were included in what you had sent me. So you did send me some additional documents. The actual text of the executive order I could send out if people were interested in seeing that. Yeah, I'll update the packet, I guess.
That'd be great.
if you'd like.
Okay. And Commissioner Mills?
I would be really curious to learn about the logistics of it, the resettlement program. What is all involved. And as far as both requirements and opportunities.
Commissioner Mills, just for point of clarification, do you mean what the county's obligations are under that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
If we decide to allow refugees to settle in Cook County, what obligations or requirements and opportunities are there?
I can look into this and provide a more detailed answer in January. My initial answer is going to be, they would be the same obligations that the county currently has and has had for many years before this executive order. It's something that's already existed. But as far as the content of those obligations, I can sure do the research and let you know.
Okay, that'd be great.
Well,
You know where a bunch of vacant houses are, Dave?
well, that's what I was gonna, I was gonna elaborate a little bit in my thinking, if I may. I want to be as compassionate as I can as a leader, and recognize, the reality of refugees in the world, and also recognize the issues we have in county regarding housing, and also recognize the issues we have regarding employees, finding employees. And so I just think it's a really interesting conversation to look at this, and if there are certain requirements that the county would be, obligated towards, then that's also a factor. Or if there's opportunities, if there's federal dollars to build housing for refugees, that'd be good to know too.
Okay.
Thunder Bay, we just had this on the Pigeon River. Mike, were you at the meeting when we were talking about the refugees in Thunder Bay and Toronto? They had them in college campuses and had nowhere to move them, and the deadline was coming for students to move into the campuses, and we were having a discussion at our Pigeon River Steering Committee about how they were going to address that up there.
Was that that's in Canada, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they have places to put people where we don't. Obviously, they didn't come to that meeting asking us to take them here, but it's a huge issue on that side also.
Having been involved in this in Anoka County many years ago, the start of the program was, quite frankly, because of lack of housing, was that in the church I belonged to, families took in these refugees to their homes. And that's how that started, the whole small refugee movement in Anoka. And so I could see that might be an impact if someone wanted to do that. But we don't have the housing. But I could see that as an application, so.
Yeah.
If we didn't approve this, then we'd preclude them being able to do that.
Okay, so we'll table this till January 14th. Thank you, Molly, on that. Auditor.
Madam Chair, the first issue is considering the county board compensation for 2020. We looked at it at a previous meeting, and you all wanted to confer with other counties at AMC before making a decision, but we need an action today on that, either to keep it the same or to make a change. So.
Commissioner Mills?
I blabbed about it on the radio a little bit, but I didn't find anything at our conference that really said we need to raise it, we're good. Aside, I think it makes good sustainable sense to have a cost of living increase. And then we can look at it a little more broadly going forward, as far as the structure of pay, salary, per diems, that whole discussion. And that was, kind of thought about with department head cost of living increases, a similar, if not the same. Just seems to be, again, this isn't, I guess this is what I said on the radio, but this isn't about us per se, this is about this position, and if we value this position and the realities of the costs involved with it. And so I think it makes sense moving forward, no matter who's in the seats, that we adjust for cost of living.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Commissioner Mills. I know at our last meeting, I just want to say that I'm looking at this a little differently than my comments previously, that I would support a cost of living raise. I still be convinced of that based upon policy. It's good policy. I did Tuesday night talk to quite a few commissioners that I know in northeast Minnesota and asked about salaries and benefits and so forth. And my comments are pretty much based upon the information that was shared that we're in the bottom part of the pay scale for Minnesota counties out of the 87. And I guess I'd want to know that for sure before I'd support that. I think cost of living raises are a good policy decision to make if all things are fair, but I think I would like to have more verification of where are we. I know that we're paid well for northeast Minnesota, and but I just don't know. We don't have that data. I could be convinced of that, but I still think maybe we just need to vet more information about this, because if, for example, our salaries are high, I think we deserve a cost of living just because we're getting paid less theoretically, and we have been ever since all of us came on board because we didn't get the cost of living raises. But then again, if our salaries are very high, then I would like to look at that a little more closely and make it on the basis of data. But your point is well taken. Appreciate it. But I would like to see us just address this later when we have more information. But that's my thoughts. But I'm not opposed to it necessarily, but more information I think would be better. And we certainly could go retroactive, as well.
Commissioner Dukert?
So I learned a couple of things at AMC. It seems like a lot of the commissioners I talked to do a cost of living increase. I learned we missed an opportunity when we hired for the comp study for the staff. We left ourselves out. So we would have been able to gather data doing that and do comparisons. So that's unfortunate. And I'm disappointed that our request last year to have this addressed at Budget Committee wasn't addressed. And so it's difficult to make these decisions. It seems like every year when this is in our packet to approve, we have the exact same conversation and we never move ahead. So it's too hard to just do it sitting here having conversations with each other and not having any data, as Myron said.
Commissioner DeShaw? Your thoughts?
I don't see a reason to change the compensation. When you signed up for this position, and campaigned, you knew what you were getting into. To get into it, and then all of a sudden you're not making enough money, you're in it for the wrong reason. I'm in it to help my district, which I have since I've been here. I'd like to make a motion to keep the 2020 compensation the same as 2019.
Support.
I guess my thought would be on it, I think cost of living is an important ingredient in this. I would like to see in the future that this be addressed at the budget meeting.
Okay.
Commissioner Mills?
The other thought I had about that is, not having been on the Budget Committee, I guess I don't know all what you look at, but it also seemed like a topic for the Personnel Committee, and we could also look at that from that angle. The thing I'd say is, I just want to Commissioner DeShaw's point is, again, this isn't about us, this is about this position and the reality of costs increasing, the cost of living actually increasing. So, yeah, we all certainly made sacrifices to take this position, and we did know what we were getting into. But I also know that I want to have a sustainable future for leadership, so that's just the reality of costs, price of butter.
Commissioner Bergeron?
Yeah, I think that in regards to the Budget Advisory Committee, I think this would be a worthwhile discussion to have there, and last year, we just had too many things going on, and so, you know, there was a discussion on it, but boy, I don't even want to talk about our last meeting, because there was just so many things going on, and it just sort of came to an end. And whether we have a special meeting for that, I don't know. I also think if it goes to the Budget Advisory Committee, that we don't talk specifically so much about what that should be, but in general terms, where this group would like to see it. You know, and not recommending a certain salary, but cost of living, should we be paid more than typical because of a lot of information about the uniqueness of our county, you know, number of committees and so forth, per diems, and so I think that could be a general discussion with some guidelines, but I think that would be better for us to be more accountable, and this is the input, now we would set that salary and deal with the cost of living, deal with per diems, which is a large part of ours, and I would be reluctant to ask them to just set the salary, make a recommendation, and then we do it, but have them discuss it definitely, because they should, it's an important step to have.
Commissioner Dirkler?
Personnel Committee does job descriptions, we don't do wages on that committee.
It's
We
true.
could make a job description for us, so it'd be easier to
And score it.
let the community know what it is we do.
It's a good process.
When I was elected, I did not know what the wage was for commissioner. I know since being elected and working with other commissioners, after being elected, many commissioners who own their own businesses have lost revenue because of what decisions we make as commissioners, because of the burden. I don't think until you're actually in this position, you have any understanding of the amount of time and investment and work. I had no idea when I was elected that a commissioner would step down halfway through and I would be given the burden of taking on their committees. One of the things that I very intently did was change the health insurance compensation. So since I have been elected, basically my pay has been cut, you know, and I know that some people see it as the opposite, and they see, well, you get health insurance. Yes, that is a benefit, and yes, it is covered, but what I take home in my paycheck has changed significantly since I got hired. What I can do outside of my work as a commissioner has changed significantly. I lost clients because I can no longer give them the time needed to operate my business because my time goes to doing this job as a commissioner. And I'm not fighting for more pay, and I'm not fighting for a raise, and I'm not saying that it should change. I obviously seconded Bobby's motion. But this, like I said, this isn't a conversation we can have sitting here and bring it up. I mean, we can all have an argument about it, but it's not simple, it's not easy, and it's a difficult conversation. And you're right, it's not about us, it's about the future. And it's about how you do this. And there is just no way until you sit in the seat that you understand what it is. And as a bookkeeper and running for resorts, and I sat and looked at when they say, you know, you heard the comments out there that this is the median income in Cook County, and you as commissioners already make more than other people. So you come into a resort as a housekeeper, and maybe you make $13 an hour, you start that job, you have no responsibility, you're not responsible for the budget, you're not responsible for hiring and firing and staff and anything else, but you had better dang well make sure that you vacuum under that bed, because if I find something under there when I go in, I'm going to be really angry. And then you move up as housekeeper, and you move into shift supervisor, and maybe you make $18 an hour, and then you're responsible for staff. And then you become the director of housekeeping, and you're responsible for ordering, and staff, and budget, and everything else. We approve policy. We approve a $26 million budget. This is not a $10 an hour job that we're supposed to be doing. This is important. This is not a joke. And it is public service. Everyone that works for us is public service, and they are appropriately compensated for what they do for this community. I'm done.
So for clarification, Commissioner Schaub, you made a motion that it remain the same.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Okay. And moving on.
Madam Chair, the next thing we have to do before the end of the year is approve a budget and levy. In your packet was the proposed budget and levy. We approved that on September 24th, and that's what we saw, truth in taxation. What I just handed out is just a slight revision based upon things that have come to light, not much this year, but two things. We actually figured out how much for arts, and so there's a slight revision there that we hadn't done on September 24th, $1,000. And then Planning and Zoning, Tim Nelson had a chance to figure out how much revenue and how much expense, additional expense, to put in his budget for the vacation rental permit. And so that results in if we just put those revenues and expense in a slight reduction to the 6.05 to 5.89%, as you see there. So that's where we stand at the moment.
Okay. Commissioner Mills.
Brady, we don't have a capital reserve plan at this point, right? As far as our building plan, putting money aside, we're just kind of putting money aside knowing that we're going to need that?
We have a fund balance.
Right.
That we haven't designated, other than we've designated some in a building fund. The bulk of that was for, in case we had to have another landfill. We've used quite a bit of that over the last several years. Tim's used it for trailers, and occasionally it's come up for other projects, and we know it's there, and we've used it. But we don't have it for any other purpose. So in this budget, there's an initial attempt to start a line item for that, and that's the capital reserve is in there at $210,000. There's two building items in there. You have your regular building fund, which is large. It's at $250,000 this year. These are all the things that we've just identified, such as the camera system that's beyond its life. It needs to be replaced for $80,000, and then just a number of other things, the steps out front, et cetera. So those are things we know, and the capital reserve is for larger items, things we don't know. So it could be for large repairs that they're big enough to bond for, because that's a large additional cost when you're going to bond, but you may need to do things prior to bonding. And the other thing is to help with bonding. We've been in some really good interest rate times for the last 10 years, but that hasn't always been the case. Sometimes your bond rates might be 5, 6, 7, 8%, and as was the case when this addition was made in 1987, 98, The board had built up a substantial fund in the building fund, and used about a third of the costs of this came from the building fund and kept those interest rates low because we cashed much of it.
I guess specifically, thank you for pointing out both the building and the capital, but specifically what I'm looking at is how those numbers came about.
One of the conversations we had was we retired a bond payment, and we were going to continue to put that same payment in.
Yeah, that was initially, we would have put even more in here, had it not been, or at least initially to consider, if not for Ty Blatnick, given the retirement of that bond payment.
And I guess what I'm asking about there is, and as unpopular as this may be, but I just want to talk about it and ask about it, is the building, is that 251, is that enough? Because we were able to reduce it down from the 605, what is the best thing looking forward, looking ahead at our needs? And maybe we don't have a big enough picture, a full picture with our needs going forward yet.
We don't know. We don't have that kind of data on all of our buildings to have a good number. But we know that those kinds of costs are increasing. This building is, now it's over 20 years old, and there's a lot of buildings that are older here. So chances are those costs are not going to go down, they're going to go up.
Yes, we had a building committee meeting, and Bobby, please add any of your thoughts on this. And I did ask at the beginning of the meeting, of those department heads and other people that were there, whether, going forward, is it adequate? And my concern was, is this $210,000 adequate beyond the $250 that's already been allocated? And my take on that, in summary of that, a lot of things could happen. And I think it's better to be prepared for those than try to figure out what to do or to go into another reserve. I think we should be somewhat intentional about our long-term planning with, our buildings and so forth. And we did do a cursory kind of review of the facilities with the Wold architectural firm, and there are indications from that, but that was not comprehensive at all. But it gave us an indication that we have some issues. And I think at some point in time, I know this is not on topic, but somewhat related, that I would encourage us to really seriously consider some kind of more formative plan for some of our buildings with some kind of study, and maybe get support from mailers and so forth from a financial plan to manage that. And that could be ongoing with the building committee, which is now functioning as well. Another thing here too, that this Thai-Botnick thing, I would, if it wasn't for Thai-Botnick, I would support a much lower levy. I think I could. I don't know where exactly that'd be, and that's a group discussion, but I'd say I could look lower. But this does, even though we may have to make a decision about allocating, but having that extra $250,000 or $210,000 in there gives us a little bit more of a cushion if we take the hit. And then we've got some serious work to do. And I think we have to, form a new budget advisory committee, and that would be part of that process as well. But we'll really have to do some hard thinking about our future if the Thai-Botnick does not maintain the current levels and is significantly less. So this gives us a little more flexibility in dealing with that going forward. But I guess I just wanted to share that as a budget advisory member and building committee member.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. It's planned as building, but it may be just budget going forward, operational budget, given what might happen with Ty Blatnick.
Commissioner DeShawn?
Yeah, well, what Myron was saying on the building committee there, we got that 251 in there now, and I think just what Brian brought to us last week, we're already looking at like 125 of needs that are going to be coming up very soon. I think I'd like to see moving forward if the budget could operate without the Thieblotnick money in it, or that goes somewhere else, whether it's going to take cuts here, across the board, but to depend on money that isn't guaranteed is a hard way to operate. And, I believe I said last week there at Truth and Taxation for the last 2 rounds, I voted against the budget levy. And I know the hit that we took this year, we could have been a lot lower, but with the circumstances that we're in, I can support the 5.89. So.
Commissioner Dukert?
Just kind of off of Bobby, one of the things we could look in the future is that capital reserve fund being the PILT money. So what comes in from PILT goes into our capital reserves, and we run our budget off of everything else.
Could be.
That's why I want it to be a full board discussion rather than a committee moving forward. Put all our heads together.
Okay, any other comments, Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, so then I guess I'm looking to you guys to see, is that 251 and 210, is that going to put us as far as building, I mean, you're saying 125.
Would you like a quarter? Because there's no way to know. You can flip a quarter and see.
Right, right. I just want to be in the best position and plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's what I'm trying to flesh out here.
I think that's what we did at the 6 point.
Right.
Yes.
Yep. And so it's great to see the reduction. And obviously everyone wants that, but should we be putting that into the building fund? That's what I'm asking, is that reduction, from the 6.05.
Well, from my point of view, let's just say that it all turns out and we're held harmless, which is an option. We could get more, we could get less, we could get the same. Then we have made some decisions about where that goes by now, and I think there's definitely a need coming from the building committee, and I think we need to listen to our committees, what they're recommending. And so that's how I view it. If we receive less than Thieblotnick, we're going to have to look at this again, But this is where it go if things work out, or that we can possibly still do it. Maybe we have to look someplace else, but it's a good placeholder, and it's a justifiable placeholder.
Yeah, considering the Thieblotnick, it would have just been a 7.5, percent increase. We would be in a negative right now, so but that's because of other payments and the bond retirement and all that, but it's just really interesting where we'd be sitting if.
A lot of juggling.
Well, I don't want to but I think we have made some corrections and we made some tough decisions, and that has placed us in a much better situation.
I agree.
Than we could have been, so that when you try to, get more of what you call an operational budget that's sort of meets our needs and our service delivery model that we want, then you take, the less is not, the hit is not as bad. They're always bad, but we have some, I think thanks to Auditor Powers that, taking that money that we received from PILT and just sort of holding it there was a very good decision in the light of what happened now. If we would have spent that kind of money, we'd be looking at a very different situation. And I think, again, as Commissioner Dukert said, we have to sort of look at an operational budget and then these, hopefully that whenever this gets corrected, if it does, that it will be a little more affirmative, and there could be some legislation that might make this something where the legislation will say, no, you can count on this. But if that doesn't happen, then yes, we'll have to look at different scenarios of what we do with some of this PILT money. You can go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I think another thing is, like public health, they were able to put some money into their reserves. You know, there's a lot of that that's not seen here. The highway department put their money in for that equipment purchase that was supposed to happen, and she carried it over, so there is a lot of money sitting in these other places.
Right.
Public health is still way down in their reserve. Yeah, they are. They were at 1.2 million when I was elected, and they're way lower than that. They need 6 months of reserves.
Well, I didn't say they were flush, I said gaining ground.
Well, being on the Budget Committee, I traditionally have made a motion, so if that's, Madam Chair, if that's in order, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a levy for next year for 5.89%, which is going to be $10,367,000 and 293 cents. Oh, excuse me, $10,367,293.
I'll second that.
Any further comments or questions, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, the next item is just some additional information. I couldn't answer some of Dave's questions last meeting regarding newspaper qualifications. So it's all found in statute 331A.02. I'll be brief. So there's some key things that make a qualified newspaper, like the number of inches, 1,000 square inches minimum. At least half of the issues have no more than 75% of printed space comprised of advertising, plus the public notices. All issues for a weekly newspaper. 50% of the columns are devoted to news of local interest to the community. Be circulated in the political subdivision of the county. Have at least 400 copies delivered to paying customers, or 400 copies delivered without charge, and have its known office of issue either in the county in which it lies here or in an adjoining county, and have complied with all those conditions for at least a year immediately preceding the date of publication. So you can't just start a newspaper and say, I'll do that, and you have to be doing it for a year. So then there's a priority. So then the first priority is to designate a qualified newspaper with the known office within the political subdivision, Cook County. If there are no qualified newspapers with their base office, then you can designate a qualified newspaper with a secondary office located. That's the second priority. The third, if there are no qualified newspapers with a known office of issue or secondary office, then you can designate a qualified newspaper of general circulation. So it just means they don't have an office right here. There's an exception to those priorities. Of course, the newspaper has to be qualified, and then the publisher of another newspaper covering a period of 1 year ending no earlier than 60 days prior to designation, that the newspaper circulation reaches not fewer than 75% of the households within the political subdivision, and the newspaper has provided regular coverage of the proceedings of the governing body and will continue to do so. So it won't be a surprise to you if there's ever another newspaper outside of the county, because they'll be covering you for at least a year irregular. So.
Okay, thank you on that.
Next item is just a federal grant for wildfire mitigation. This is, we call it COCO, Coalitions and Collaboratives. It's a federal grant. It's $11,100, and it's to both Lake and Cook County. Will be the fiscal agent if you approve it. It's our coordinator, Todd Armbruster. He's the coordinator for Cook and for Lake. And this would allow him, so I talk about the duties here, but it would actually be for him to hire an intern to do those duties, and split them between here and Lake County. And there's no match to this, so I hope you approve it.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Support.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Brady.
And then, unorganized fire levies. We need to approve those at some point. And this, I don't know where mine are. There it is. So they're very similar to last year. As you can see, the total, the total dollar amount is about $1,000 less, $544 less than last year. This is for our unorganized fire districts, Colville, Gunflint, Hovland, Maple Hill, and then the two extended areas. The area around Grand Way, in the area around Lutzen, fire extension areas, so. Yes, if there are any questions, otherwise approval of those unorganized fire levies.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Our next meeting starts in 15 minutes.
Oh. The last item here is an add-on. This was the Firewise Program Coordinator Service Agreement. This is Todd Armbruster, who's been with us for, how many years, Heidi? I forget. But this is, I think it's his third renewal of this agreement. It's a 2-year agreement following the past practices. The only significant change is the dollars per hour. Proposed increase is to $32 an hour, and then setting the maximum at $44,320 from the two basic programs, which is our Secure Rural Schools source of funding and for the federal and state grants. The reason the $32 an hour came up, number one, is that it's been 2 years since an increase. We should do something in any case, but this is what Lake County has already approved for him, and he splits his time between Cook and Lake County. So this is the Firewise Committee voted to recommend that we increase it to equal what Lake County has already approved.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I do.
Yeah.
What was the previous rate?
$28.87. So it's significant, but it's,
Well, he knew he was getting into when he did the...
yeah, but it's 2 years, number one,
And it's part-time.
That's a joke. I did not mean any disrespect. I was
just,
On a grant.
What's that?
it's,
It's on a grant. It doesn't come out of levy.
yeah, this is all paid by state, federal grants and secure rural schools. The funding use is limited on secure rural schools, so it doesn't impact anything else. And just to point out, he gets paid this salary. He's a contractor, so there's no benefits, there's no mileage, meals, there's nothing else. So
To continue with Dave's joke, there's no free money.
That was my only question, thank you. That was my only joke, too.
Oh. That's good.
Okay. So we
Keep your
need a
day
motion?
Yeah, I will.
Motion?
Oh, Heidi moved, I seconded.
Okay, lost in the
Yep.
conversation.
And the joke, yeah.
No further comments or questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, moving on to administrator updates.
I'll try to be quick, knowing that we have another meeting coming up. Just quick updates on the two two of the capital projects. The hockey rink and warming house is opening up to the public this Friday, the 19th, or is it the 19th?
29th, right?
No, that's when the open
That's
house
the open
is.
house.
Thank you.
And maybe that's on Thursday then. It's the 19th, sorry, I'm losing track of time. But I know that a lot of people have been over checking it out. People are pretty excited. They've been making ice with this colder weather. And I believe Auditor Powers and I are meeting with Diane Booth tomorrow to go and check all the boxes so that we can close out that part of that bonding on those projects over there. We went last week to Hoveland Public Works Garage, did a final walkthrough with the architect and with the contractor. I've received a letter of substantial completion, which the contractor signed, and I'll hopefully get today to sign, so we can begin moving in over there. So I left that message this morning for Charlie Sawyer, that they can begin moving in. There's really like one more thing they have to do, and that's move the pressurized washer in, and Brian will take that over later this week. And then there's some electrical work wiring that. So we're in good shape on both of those, and I think as you mentioned, there is an open house on the 29th to the public. The board, the Community Center Board will be providing food and refreshments, and the public is invited, and I hope we can all show up there. I guess there might be a possibility of a quorum of commissioners there. I hope there is, actually. It's a great opportunity for people to celebrate this this facility, I think. So that's my updates on capital projects, and I have one other request. It's a proposal about the iCompass video manager. This is something that previous administrator Cadwell talked about. He put money in the budget for it. It integrates the video that we take with the agenda. And so one of the features of that is it can be tagged with the minutes, and then if you want to skip to a certain place in the agenda, it'll bring you to that spot in the video and you can watch it. So there are obviously those kinds of improvements. I would say that the main reason that this is valuable is not while it's live streaming, but in the archive version, it will caption the video. This brings us into compliance with ADA rules about captioning videos, which if we're going to continue to do videos, which I believe are really important in the community and to this community, that we need to also address the captioning issue. It does one other thing as well, and it gives us a backup of the video. So in the past, when we've occasionally experienced a blip in our internet service, and then it brings the video down, and then we lose video, this would continue to stream it onto a backup, so we'd be able to upload the video later. I'm bringing it to you now, it's next year's budget, but I'm bringing it to you now because the vendor called us and said, end of the year special, instead of $5,600 a year, if you do it now, we'll make it $4,600, and that's the cost that you'll pay every year forever into the future. That will be a locked-in amount. So that's $1,000 a year saving, so that's why I'm bringing it now. It will work with the rest of the equipment that we have, so there are no additional costs that I know of. And we'll, after the first of the year, start working on it. So I guess I'm looking for an approval on that, or questions, comments.
Commissioner Dukert?
So it won't be captioned while it's live streamed, but we're still ADA compliant?
Yes. Captioning while you're live streaming is hard to do.
I was just looking for another reason to shut it off for live streaming. Motion to approve?
Second.
Comments?
So what did we budget for, and sorry, I don't have the line item in front of me, but did we budget for 5,600?
We did.
Well, we could have reduced it by 0.01%.
No, zero.
You could still give yourself a raise for that savings.
That's not in my proposal.
Okay, no, that sounds.
Be sure something else will go up 1,000. Expect.
Any other? Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
You're welcome. Okay, we have an EDA board applicant that needs to be approved for reappointment.
Motion to approve Howard Hedstrom for another term.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And, let's see.
And Helen Muth is here for the
Yes.
next one.
We have, an ad was placed in the News Herald and ran for 2 editions to fill the board and committee vacancies. The deadline to apply has passed. 1 application was received for the ALS vacancy, so we're requested as a board to review the applicant and appoint Helen Muth as the ALS board effective January 1st, 2020.
I'll make the motion to approve Helen.
Support.
And I just say that I've worked with Helen on the library board in town here, and she's a wonderful advocate for libraries in our community, and I'm really happy that she applied and for this position as well.
Thank you, Helen, for...
Thanks, Helen.
I know you have a lot of experience and expertise.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Welcome, Helen. You'll do a great job with the library. And, let's see, we have just I gave you some time to think about selecting board and vice chair for next year. Any further thoughts on that? How you'd like to proceed? Not?
I was pretty critical of the automated chair, vice chair succession and, letting things roll around in my empty head a little bit. It made a lot more sense as far as bringing more stability to the county, and that's one of my goals, is to have something that's predictable and steadfast. And it doesn't mean we must do that succession, but it's just a good way for us to plan. And I don't have a strong opinion about, I don't know that it's necessary for that rotation to happen still, but just keeping things in a line or in a row, I think makes a lot of sense, so.
Well, the reason I suggested it was that for a year, we could move in that direction. Attorney Hicken is already asking us to review and update some of our policies, so it wouldn't have to be something forever, cast in stone. It would be kind of an interim to see how that would work. There's a lot of areas where the vice chair gets a lot of experience through the chair, and when they're ready then in the next year to move into the chair position, they have a better background than just going in cold. So that's my only reasoning.
It seems like making for a stronger chair, and that's something that I support, so.
Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, we will consider it.
Just to clarify that, I don't know if you're looking for a motion or not, but maybe just a discussion that, I talked to some of the other counties, and they're all different, but many of them, most of them that I talked to have sort of this expectation that the vice chair would move into it, but there's always extenuating circumstances. I mean, the person may not want to, or, wait a year or whatever. Some have the same board chair every year, and that is a decision. But they always have a vice chair that, there's sort of an expectation that if something happens, the vice chair will be in charge, and that the chair and vice chair should work together throughout that year in dealing with some issues and gaining some experience. So I think it's just a good expectation that we'd have. I certainly wouldn't want to have the vice chair delegated for someone that you don't want to consider for chair, because then you wouldn't have that sustainability. And I think you give some credibility to it and sustainability, but it doesn't mean that it has to happen.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Rena, would you?
No, not at this time. I just think, it's good to have the conversation, and we may want to consider something as we do the bylaws more long-term, as a more consistent way, but it's good to have the discussion. in
So be
advance.
ready then, somebody will be ready in January to take these two positions. Okay, Commissioner reports? I guess the only thing I would have to say is I thought AMC was excellent this year. I really, in the committees that I went to, which I'll report at the next meeting, were well done and well presented to the committee, and hats off to Commissioner Svay in Lake County, who's now the president of AMC. And so it was a good session and time well spent there. Meeting updates? Commissioner DeKirk?
Not a meeting update, but meetings to note or concerns. Truth in taxation, we had a citizen that gave us the list of 12, which reminded me, yes, I love Oprah and her 12 Days of Christmas, and now Ellen DeGeneres does 12 Days of Christmas, and so I have a more positive spin on the 12 Days of Christmas that I would like to share with you, and it is how we listen and support our community. 1, we increase the public health and human service staff to meet the demand and offer preventative services. This reduced the cost for out-of-home placement and other restorative services. 2, the Restorative Justice Committee was formed, and similar programs like the drug court have been formed over the years, and this has led to a reduction of incarcerations. The downside, people don't see why we need a jail anymore, so the programs are working really well. 3, we agreed to go way over budget on County Road 17, and that was a vital road to the community. And those are the things that we are willing to do to support everyone in our community. 4, building a warming house to serve youth activities, and we will now have an open house, and that warming house was discussed before I got elected. 5, investing in our equipment replacement plan that keeps our equipment on the road and not in the repair shop. As we all know, during the last 21-inch snowstorm, Duluth had 4 graders down and had to authorize the purchase of 12 plows the Tuesday after the storm. 6, hiring an administrator to help us plan ahead. The result, for the first time since I've been elected, a balanced budget. 7, taking on the huge responsibility of the YMCA. I am sure at times we all wish we didn't have to deal with it, but the voters voted for it, and so we do the hard work and we move ahead. 8, reinvesting in bonding money rather than reducing the levy. This will reduce costs later and help us cover repairs better. 9, working together with our staff to complete a class compensation study and bring our wages into a competitive range. This helps us keep and maintain our staff and recruit more qualified staff. It has also led to a 3-year contract. That also was a first since I've been elected. 10, correctly staffing the assessor's office in order to complete the quintile and have all property in Cook County properly assessed, making a fair and equitable system. 11, attending a long list of committees to secure funding, reduce cost, and work with other counties and legislators. And 12, we as commissioners sacrifice our time, our family, and our outside jobs for the county to support county government and our citizens. I believe that we all support our citizens the best that we can. So a Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you for everything you have done.
Thank you. That was well done.
12 days of county Christmas. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just one last thought, perhaps in the next few days or so, I could get together with Rena, whoever, to work on a bill. I've never written a bill, but there must be a Google way to write a bill.
There's a YouTube video on it.
YouTube video, but it's really important that we...
I'll look that up right now.
That we take that suggestion.
I'm pretty sure Mr. Rogers covered that. There's also a video.
Madam Chair, before we adjourn,
Courthouse Rock has a
Can
video
you-
about how a bill becomes a law.
could we have it 10 minutes in between?
Just a minute, yes.
No, I'm just asking
Yes.
so that I can change the
Yes.
videos
Yep.
from one to the other. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a good holiday. And if there's anything else, Commissioner
I would like
Ryan?
to express my appreciation and thank you to Jenny Storlie for our board chair, 2 years in a row, and a lot of things have happened, and you've sort of guided us with patience and keeping your cool and all those great things that are important for us, and thanks so much for your commitment. It's not an easy job, I know.
You're very welcome. Our next regular board meeting will be in January 7th of 2020. We'll have to get used to saying that, at 8:30, where we will review all of our jobs, our boards, our commissions, and chair and vice chair. Motion to...
So moved.
You read my mind. We will have a 10-minute break so we can all readjust ourselves here.
That was well done, Heidi, thank you. And on a positive note.